Hi friends, welcome back to Azure Content YouTube channel. This is part 20 in SQL Real-Time Scenarios playlist. In this video, we are going to learn how to unpivot a table in SQL Server. So let's see the requirement in details. So in our previous video, we have seen how to pivot the table in SQL Server, which means how to take the distinct values from a column and convert it into separate columns so that the data will be represented in a more simpler way. So you can see this is what we achieved in the previous videos where we converted the values from month name column into individual columns itself in the output table. And we also created a new table which is called table, pivoted SQL data table. In part 19 of this playlist, you could see that we created this table dynamically by taking the column names from the sales table and we pivoted the data of sales table and we created a new table called pivoted SQL table. And this is how the table looks like. Now in this video, our aim is to unpivot the table, which means we will convert the columns again back into the rows. So pivot means converting the rows into the column, but unpivot will do the opposite, which means it will convert the columns into rows. So we want to achieve this as the output. So this is how our output table should look like. And if you compare the sales table and the output unpivoted table, there will be a little difference as unpivoting would not be able to segregate the data, which means if you see the first row where employee ID is 1 and month name is Jan, it is having sales amount 1000. And similar to this data, there is another data for employee ID 1 for the month of Jan and the amount for that is 1300, which we aggregated and created this pivot table by summing up the values as you can see here. So the amount for the employee ID 1 with month name Jan was summed up to 2300. But now what we have to do is we have to convert this value into unpivoted data. So now what we need to do is we need to convert this value into separate rows. So if you see in the process of unpivoting the data, now our expectation is for employee ID 1, there will be multiple rows corresponding to each of the columns present in the pivoted table. So that in the unpivoted table, we will be having separate rows for each of these columns. So the number of rows in the unpivoted table corresponding to each employee ID will be equal to the number of columns present in the pivoted table. Okay, but it will not be able to segregate the column by unsumming the amount, which means it will be only having 2300 as the amount for the employee ID 1 for the month of Jan. It will not be able to segregate it into two parts as is present in the sales table. Okay, so this is what we have to achieve. We have to unpivot the table which we had pivoted in the previous video. So let's go ahead in SSMS and let's start creating the SQL query. So this is the pivoted table that we created in the previous video. Now we have to unpivot this. So the process is very simple. As we had written pivot query, similar to that we can also write unpivot query. So for that we have to specify what are the columns that we need in the unpivoted table. So if you see the columns in the output table that is expected is employee ID, month and amount. So we will write down the same column names. Employee ID is existing in the pivoted table as well, but if you see month and amount columns does not exist in the pivoted table. Those are the columns which we need to create explicitly. So here I will mention month and amount column from this pivoted table. Currently if I run till this point, it will not be able to give any result because these two columns does not exist in the pivoted table. Now what we have to do is we have to use unpivot operator in order to create these columns which are not existing till now out of the pivoted table. Okay, so how we will do that? Let me execute this again. So if you remember, for pivot operator, we used to write the aggregate function here. Inside this, we used to write sum of amount. Okay, but now we do not need to perform any aggregation. We just need to convert this row into column values corresponding to each employee ID. It will create multiple rows. So for this, it will create 1 2 3 4 5 6 7 8. So for employee ID 1 it should create 8 rows. Similarly for employee ID 2 it should create 8 corresponding rows, and for employee ID 3 as well it should create another 8 rows. So in total we are expecting, after unpivoting this table, we would be getting 8 into 3, that is 23 records, okay, which means 23 rows. Okay, so when we use unpivot operator, we don't need any aggregate function here. We will just write amount for, and what is the column on which we will be performing unpivoting? It will be on the month column. If you see, we need the month column which needs to be created, where we will be converting all these columns from the pivoted table into the rows present in this month column. Okay, so amount for month in, okay, and here in this bracket we have to specify all the column names present in the pivoted table that we will be converting into rows of unpivoted table. Okay, so let me copy this. Let me copy one row, and I will copy with headers so that I don't need to write each of the column names explicitly. I'll just copy paste by giving comma here. Okay, so let me format it correctly by providing comma and removing space. Okay, so these are the column names that we need to convert as a row. So I just cut the values and pasted it here. Okay, and we just need to give an alias, say suppose unpivoted data. Okay, so if I run this, I'm expecting that it will be unpivoting this data. So you can see we have got 24 rows in total. That was our expectation. And if you see for each of the employee ID, it has generated uh, 8 rows as expected, because we are having 8 columns in pivoted SQL table apart from employee ID, starting from Jan, Feb, March, April, May, August, September, and December. Okay, so that is what we wanted to achieve. Let me run both the queries at the same time. So you can see that it has converted all the columns into corresponding row values. Okay, so if you see for the month of Jan, employee ID 1, the amount is 2300, and that is what is getting represented here. And you can validate the amount is coming same as is present in the pivoted table. So that's how we can achieve unpivoting of a table by using unpivot operator, similar to how we used pivot operator in the previous videos. Now in next video, what we will do is we will convert this hard-coded value into dynamic SQL query, so that we do not need to explicitly mention the column names present in the pivoted table, and while unpivoting the data we do not need to hard code any value. So we will create the dynamic SQL query so that it will take the column names automatically from the source table, and we do not need to hard code these values in the unpivot query. Okay, so please stay tuned for the next video, and please practice this query at your end as well. So if you like this video, please hit on like button, and please subscribe to my channel if you haven't done it yet. Thank you.